The simulation chamber hummed with artificial energy as Commander Xal'Vek observed from his elevated position. The walls of the room shimmered with containment fields, creating an arena where combat simulations determined the worthiness of new species. The Targari Empire had conquered dozens of civilizations across the galaxy, their technological superiority making them near invincible. Every species they encountered had been studied, catalogued, and assessed for combat viability. Until now, Commander Xal'Vek's multiple eyes locked onto the lone figure standing in the center of the arena, a human soldier. Sergeant Mason, they called him. He was unremarkable in stature compared to the hulking Targari warriors, his frame smaller, less armored, his flesh soft and fragile. Yet something about the way he stood, the casual way his muscles tensed without appearing rigid, made Xal'Vek uneasy. The sparring drone activated with a deep mechanical whir, its sleek metallic form rising from the floor. Designed with advanced neural prediction algorithms, it could analyze an opponent's movement, detect muscle tension, and strike with the precision of 1,000 battle-tested warriors. It had bested every species before, even those enhanced with cybernetics or telepathic foresight. Xal'Vek gave the order. Begin. The drone lunged. Mason moved. To the untrained eye, it was impossible to follow, a blur of motion that defied logic. The drone's first strike, calibrated to match the human's supposed reaction time, found nothing but empty air. Mason had already shifted, tilting his body just enough for the attack to skim harmlessly past his shoulder. Before the machine could adjust, he pivoted, stepping inside its range with an almost lazy grace. The drone adapted. Its programming kicked in, recalculating, doubling its speed. It attacked again, this time with an inescapable combination. 2 strikes from opposite angles, mathematically perfect in their precision. A species without enhanced reflexes would be struck down instantly. But Mason was gone before the strikes landed. He twisted his body at the last possible moment, a movement so absurdly precise that Xal'Vek's eyes widened in shock. Mason didn't dodge the way trained warriors did. He anticipated. His body reacted before the attack was fully executed, slipping through gaps that should not have existed. The drone recalibrated frantically, adapting to a combatant that should not be this fast. It struck out again. This time Mason didn't dodge. He stepped into the attack. The move made no sense, but in a fraction of a second, his forearm deflected the drone's strike at just the right angle, redirecting its force away from him. And then he struck back. A single blow. Fast. Precise. Devastating. The drone's metal head snapped backward, sparks flying as it crashed into the ground. Silence filled the room. Xal'Vek rose from his seat, his claws gripping the railing. Pause the simulation. The engineers hesitated before complying. The drone twitched once before its systems powered down, its predictive software completely overwhelmed. The chamber doors hissed open, and Xal'Vek descended into the arena, his towering form approaching Mason, who was rolling his shoulder with a casual grin. The human's expression was infuriatingly relaxed, as if he hadn't just humiliated one of the Empire's finest combat drones. Xal'Vek's voice was low, measured. "How did you do that?" Mason tilted his head. "Do what?" "You lack augmentation. Your species does not possess telepathic foresight. And yet you moved before the attack was executed. That should not be possible." Mason smirked. "I dunno, Commander. Guess I'm just lucky." Xal'Vek's mandibles clicked in irritation. He hated when inferior species played games. Luck does not allow you to react faster than an AI-calibrated assault program. Explain. Mason sighed, stretching his arms behind his head. All right. Look, it's not some magic trick. It's instinct. Humans don't just react, we predict. Xal'Vek narrowed his eyes. Explain. Mason tapped the side of his head. Your AI reads movement, sure. But humans? We feel it before it happens. We evolved as both predators and prey. That means we don't just see an attack, we sense it. Muscle tension, tiny shifts in balance, microexpressions. All of that information gets processed before we're even conscious of it. Our reflexes aren't just fast. They're adaptive. Your machine tries to calculate my moves, but my body already made a decision before it even finished its analysis. Xal'Vek processed the information in stunned silence. If what Mason said was true, then it meant. You mean to say? Xal'Vek's voice was almost a whisper. Your species is unpredictable? Mason grinned. Now you're getting it. A chilling realization settled over Xal'Vek. The Targari had spent centuries perfecting warfare, relying on the predictability of their enemies. But these humans, they didn't follow patterns. They broke them. and that made them something far more dangerous than any species the Empire had encountered before. They weren't just strong. They weren't just fast. They were chaos incarnate. The interrogation chamber was dimly lit, its metallic walls humming with the low resonance of energy fields. Commander Xal'Vek stood motionless, his towering form casting a jagged shadow across the reflective floor. In front of him, secured to the reinforced chair by gravlock restraints, sat Sergeant Mason, looking entirely too comfortable for someone in enemy custody. His expression was relaxed, almost amused, as if he were merely waiting for a drink to be served rather than being interrogated by one of the galaxy's most feared military commanders. Xal'Vek clicked his mandibles in irritation. He had interrogated warriors, tacticians, and leaders from across the cosmos, and none had ever exuded such casual arrogance in the face of captivity. Humans were proving to be an anomaly in every sense of the word. He intended to understand why.
"You lack cybernetic enhancements," began, his voice a deep, resonant growl. "No neural augments. No reflex boosters. Yet you move faster than a predictive AI. You anticipate attacks. How?" Mason smirked, shifting slightly in his seat despite the restraints. "I told you already, it's instinct." Eyes narrowed. Instinct is an excuse for creatures that act without thought. Your movements were calculated. Precise. No species moves before an attack is fully initiated unless they possess some form of precognitive ability. Mason leaned back, exhaling as if this conversation bored him. "Oh, I get it now. You guys don't have this, do you? Prediction. Your species, hell, your entire empire, fights like a machine. Everything's calculated. Everything's based on probabilities. You don't understand what it means to just feel something before it happens." Claude's hand twitched, a sharp scraping sound echoing as his fingers flexed against the meta table. "Do not insult the intelligence of the. We have conquered civilizations far more advanced than your fragile species. And how's that going for you?" Mason quipped, raising an eyebrow. "'Cause from where I'm sitting, your war machine just got its ass handed to it by a bunch of fragile humans who, by your own words, shouldn't even be capable of fighting at this level." Bristled, his mandibles clicking in frustration. He would not allow this human to gain control of the conversation. He had to understand. "You claim your reflexes are the result of instinct, but no instinct functions at the speed you displayed. I watched your combat simulation. You moved before the drone's attack had even fully formed." Mason nodded. "Exactly. That's what you don't get. Humans aren't just reacting. We're predicting. Subconsciously." Tilted his head slightly, a gesture of skepticism. "Explain." Mason sighed, shaking his head like a teacher dealing with a particularly dense student. "All right, fine. Here's the deal. Humans evolved as both predators and prey. That means we had to develop a sense of anticipation, an ability to read threats before they fully materialized. It's not something we consciously think about. It's automatic." He lifted his bound hands slightly, flexing his fingers. "Every tiny movement you make, your breathing, the way your muscles tense before you strike, our brains pick that up without us even realizing it. Our bodies respond before our minds even catch up." Processed this carefully, his mind working through the implications. The Empire had built its military strategy around precise calculations. Their warfare relied on patterns, on predictable responses. If Mason was telling the truth, then humans operated outside those calculations. They weren't just fast. They were adaptive. "You are saying your species functions on an instinctive combat mode that operates faster than conscious?" asked. Mason nodded. "Bingo. We call it gut feeling, but it's really just our subconscious working overtime. And it's not just in combat. It's in everything we do. Driving vehicles, playing sports, hell, even throwing a punch in a bar fight. Our brains and bodies are wired to react before we even think about reacting. That's why your AI couldn't hit me. It was trying to calculate my movements while I was already 3 steps ahead." Leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "And you claim all humans possess this ability?" "Every last one of us," Mason confirmed. Some better than others, sure. Soldiers and athletes. We train to make it sharper. But even the average human has it. We're chaos, Commandant. You can predict us because we don't even know what we're gonna do half the time. It's why we survive. Why we thrive. Why we win. Grip on the table tightened. He understood now why his forces had suffered unexpected losses. Why his warriors had been thrown into disarray despite their superior technology. They fought with precision. The humans fought with instinct. And instinct was proving to be a far deadlier weapon. Slowly straightened, staring down at Mason with a mixture of admiration and dread. The Empire had always assumed that knowledge and prediction were the ultimate keys to victory. But they had never accounted for a species that could function outside the bounds of logic. We assumed you were weak, admitted. That your species was inferior to the calculated precision of our military. It appears we were mistaken. Mason's smirk returned. Yeah, you were. But hey, don't feel bad. Everyone underestimates us at first. Turned away, signaling for the guards. Take him back to his cell. I have much to consider. As the restraints disengaged and the guards led Mason away, the human cast one last look over his shoulder. You should probably end this war before we get really creative, he said with a wink. Just a friendly warning. The doors sealed shut behind him. Commandant remained motionless for several long moments, processing everything he had learned. This war had just become far more dangerous than he had ever imagined.
The battlefield was chaos. Plasma fires streaked across the ruined cityscape as explosions sent debris raining down in every direction. The air was thick with smoke, the acrid scent of scorched metal and burning flesh mingling into an oppressive haze. Commander Xal'Vek stood on the elevated command platform of the forward operations base, his multiple eyes scanning the combat below. The humans should have been losing. They should have been easy to break. The Targari Empire had warred across the stars for centuries, toppling civilizations with calculated precision, overwhelming them with superior technology and battle-tested strategies. And yet, here they were, watching their forces struggle against an enemy that refused to fight the way they were supposed to. Xal'Vek's clawed hand tightened on the railing as he focused on a group of human soldiers moving through the wreckage. Their tactics defied logic. A squad of Targari warriors had cornered them, cutting off their retreat. By all calculations, they were trapped. The warriors advanced in formation, weapons primed, their movements a perfect execution of Targari battle doctrine. Predictable, controlled, unstoppable. The humans, on the other hand, moved like a wildfire, scattered and erratic. One moment, they were sprinting for cover, the next they were vaulting over debris, shifting positions in ways that made no tactical sense. A plasma round lanced toward one of them, a soldier marked as Corporal Diaz by his armor insignia. He should have been hit. The shot was precise, aimed directly at his center mass. But at the last possible second, Diaz twisted his body just enough for the blast to pass within an inch of his ribs, then immediately dropped into a roll, his rifle coming up mid-motion to fire a return shot that struck the Targari gunner square between the eyes. The move hadn't been planned, hadn't been calculated. He had felt it coming. Xal'Vek hissed in frustration, watching as more Targari fell. It wasn't just their speed, it was their unpredictability. The Empire's combat AIs had been programmed to counter every known form of engagement. But humans didn't follow patterns. They didn't adhere to strict formations or logical battlefield decisions. They adapted. In another part of the battlefield, a human fighter pilot was engaged in a dogfight with a Targari interceptor. The Empire's ships were faster, more maneuverable, and outfitted with predictive targeting systems. The human ship should have been vaporized within seconds. And yet, the pilot flew in ways that no AI could have predicted, cutting the engines mid-turn, spinning wildly to dodge a lock-on, accelerating at a seemingly random angle before flipping backward in a move so reckless it should have killed him. The Targari pilot hesitated for a fraction of a second, unable to anticipate what the human would do next. That fraction of a second was all it took. The human ship spun into position and fired, the blast tearing through the interceptor's hull and sending it spiraling into the ground in a fiery explosion. Xal'Vek's mandibles twitched as he turned to his tactical officers. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We have superior numbers, superior firepower, superior coordination. They should not be winning."
One of the officers, clearly shaken, adjusted his display. Their movements, they're erratic, unpredictable. Our targeting systems can't adjust fast enough. Every time we think we've cornered them, they shift tactics entirely. There is no pattern, Commander. Xal'Vek knew this was true. He had seen it himself in the combat simulation with Sergeant Mason. Had he listened to the humans' warning then, he might have prepared differently. Might have called for a retreat before they lost an entire fleet to sheer chaos. But no, he had been arrogant. He had believed that the Targari war machine could adapt. Now he wasn't so sure. Below, the battle raged on. A squad of Targari warriors tried to outflank a group of human soldiers, only for the humans to somehow anticipate the maneuver and counter with explosives placed in advance, as if they had known exactly how the Targari would move before they even made their decision. A sniper took out 3 officers in rapid succession, adjusting for wind, trajectory, and target movement with an efficiency that no standard soldier should have been capable of. This was no ordinary war. This was something else entirely. Xal'Vek inhaled deeply, forcing himself to remain composed. If the Targari could not predict human tactics, they had to change their own. But how could they, when every battle doctrine they had relied on for centuries was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to fight by any known rules? His eyes flicked back to the front lines, where more of his warriors were falling. The humans fought like animals, wild, instinctive, relentless. But it was more than that. They learned. Every failed attack made them better. Every lost soldier sharpened their rage. Every ambush they survived made them deadlier for the next encounter. And that terrified him. Xal'Vek turned to his officers, his voice cold. Pull back the remaining forces. Regroup at the secondary command post. One of his lieutenants hesitated. Commander, are we retreating? Xal'Vek's mandibles twitched in frustration, but he knew the truth. If they stayed, they would be wiped out. No, he said firmly. We are reassessing. Because if they did not, then this war would not just be another campaign for the Empire. It would be their extinction.
The war was over. Not in the way wars usually ended, with treaties signed and terms negotiated, but in the way a wildfire finally consumes all that it touches and leaves only scorched earth behind. The once mighty Targari Empire, conquerors of countless worlds, had been broken, not by superior firepower, not by overwhelming numbers, but by something they had never accounted for. Unpredictability. Commander Xal'Vek stood in the ruins of what had once been the Imperial War Council's Grand Hall. The towering obsidian pillars that once signified the indomitable might of the Empire were now shattered, smoke curling from their broken edges. The banners of the Targari, which had once hung proudly in every star system they had claimed, lay in tattered remnants at his feet. The air smelled of burnt metal and death. Across from him, Sergeant Mason stood with his rifle slung lazily over his shoulder, his stance relaxed in that infuriatingly human way, as if he had never doubted this outcome for a second. His armor was scuffed, dirted with the evidence of the battle that had finally crushed the last of the Targari resistance, but there was no exhaustion in his eyes. If anything, he looked amused. "Well," Mason said, kicking a broken piece of a Targari war banner aside. "That was fun." Xal'Vek's claws twitched at his sides. Even now, at the end of everything, the human was making light of the situation. It was something Xal'Vek would never understand about them, their ability to find humor in destruction, to smile even when surrounded by the ruin of an empire. "This is what you wanted." Xal'Vek's voice was low, weary. "To burn an empire to the ground?" Mason raised an eyebrow. "We didn't start this war, Commander. You did. You looked at us and thought we were weak. Thought you could roll in with your fancy war machines and wipe us off the map like we were just another footnote in your conquest." He took a step forward, gesturing around them. "Turns out, we don't do footnotes." Xal'Vek closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. He had believed in the superiority of the Targari. Had believed that war was nothing more than a series of calculations, a matter of numbers and technology. But the humans had defied every expectation. Every strategy he had deployed had been countered, not with superior tactics, but with something far worse. Chaos. They had fought without pattern, without logic. They had taken losses that should have broken their morale, only to come back twice as ferocious. They had ignored centuries of proven battle doctrine and instead rewritten the very nature of warfare. And now, the empire that had once stretched across 100 star systems was reduced to rubble. Mason sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as he surveyed the wreckage. "You know, you could have just left us alone. Saved yourself a whole lot of trouble." Xal'Vek opened his eyes and looked at the human. "We underestimated you." "No shit." Xal'Vek's mandibles twitched. "We have never encountered a species like yours. One that does not adhere to strategy. One that fights without a clear plan, yet always finds a way to win." He turned his gaze to the distant skyline, where the last of the Targari warships smoldered, their great hulks listing like wounded beasts. "It is terrifying." Mason tilted his head. "Yeah, you're not the first to say that." Xal'Vek's grip tightened into a fist. "What will you do now? Enslave us? Wipe us out as we attempted to do to you?" Mason's smirk faded slightly, and he studied the defeated commander for a long moment before shaking his head. "Nah, that's not how we roll." Xal'Vek frowned. "Then what do you want?" Mason exhaled. "A drink. A hot meal. Maybe a bed that doesn't feel like a slab of concrete." He looked at Xal'Vek again, his expression unreadable. "And for you to remember this." Xal'Vek narrowed his eyes. "Remember what?" "That when you pick a fight with humanity, you don't just go up against soldiers or armies." Mason's voice was quieter now, but somehow heavier, carrying the weight of every battle fought, every city burned, every soldier lost. "You go up against all of us. Every single human who has ever been told they weren't good enough. Every underdog, every misfit, every stubborn bastard who refuses to quit even when the odds say they should. You don't fight an army. You fight a species that doesn't know when to stay down." Xal'Vek stared at him, the truth of those words sinking deep into his mind. He had thought humanity was weak. He had believed they could be crushed like all the others. But they weren't like the others. They weren't just warriors, they were survivors. And survival, it seemed, was the most powerful weapon of all. Mason adjusted his rifle and gave a final nod. "See you around, Commander." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Xal'Vek standing alone in the ruins of an empire that had once believed itself invincible. The war was over. The Targari were finished. And humanity had made its mark on the galaxy. Not with peace. Not with diplomacy. But with the undeniable truth that no matter how advanced or powerful an empire thought itself to be, it could never, ever predict what humans would do next.